So before we jump into demos, let's talk about the why we might need this, and then the what we're going to use it for, and how we're going to do it. So first off, there's just an easy quote. Again and again, we hunt for that document we urgently need and is nowhere to be found. We have more data than ever before, but we struggle to navigate to the right data the moment we need it. Just a fun little quote, probably experienced by everyone at some point. But the net is there's obviously in the real world many challenges to deploying state-of-the-art models from across multiple domains with real world messy data kind of at scale. There's lots of different document or data input types that we have to handle. These input files are stored everywhere in siloed parts of the organization. And real pipelines really often in deployment need to be able to bring together powerful state-of-the-art models from across multiple domains to effectively execute on real-world pipelines and use cases. These also often require data scientists with different specializations, different backgrounds. At one point, you might need a CV or computer vision specialist to help with the kind of the OCR part of a pipeline and all of the real world nuances to deal with messy machine or handwritten PDF text data. You might need a data scientist that focuses on NLP when it gets to different sorts of extraction techniques, and maybe a different NLP data scientist that focuses on speech transcription or translation. There's real world use cases deployed at scale often require capabilities and state-of-the-art modeling techniques from multiple domains. And so what is and how does the business process accelerator help us? You can think of the business process accelerator as basically provides a studio or a UI and all of the backend managed services orchestrated by Azure functions for a user to quickly select and deploy multiple domains. So there's a lot there, and we're going to kind of unpack that and show with the demo today. But as you'll see with the demos, through the studio, you can, for example, start from an audio file or a PDF file or a text file, and slowly start to build transformation by transformation, a multi-domain AI pipeline. So maybe you have a pipeline, for example, that starts, from audio files in Spanish, translated to English, then transcribed to text. Then maybe further summarized abstractively or extractively using state-of-the-art NLP transformers, and maybe translate it to Mandarin, for example. What kind of sounds like a pretty straightforward use case in terms of the number of steps that you're doing, but you're already using one powerful base model for transcription, another powerful deep learning model for translation, and yet another SOTA model for summarization, right? And with this pipeline, we've only touched 2 of our cognitive services. So overall, there's much more information in our repo, but let's jump into our technical demos. And from here, I'm going to hand over to my colleague, James Hoff, to kind of show several of them.
Thank you, Brandon. Could you maybe show the next slide?
Sure.
Maybe the one after that, the common use cases is the one I'm looking for. Yeah. So the birth of this accelerator was that Brandon and I and many of the CSAs internally, we generate proof of concept for a lot of different customers. And I would say I've never worked on the exact same pipeline twice, right? And the idea is that we wanted to create something that was, extremely configurable, extremely simple, and tried to avoid, having to reinvent the wheel every time we got a new cognitive service pattern. And so what you're going to see is the result of that. And so what this is and what this is not. What this is it's an accelerator. This is for developers. This is for potentially data scientists and even business people The idea is that I can very quickly test out an idea. If I think, wow, I have these documents, I wonder how well speech to text would work on this, along with, maybe the language studio with a custom, maybe a Hugging Face model. I can very quickly sandbox that and give it a try. Um, this is not a product, right? So this is an open source project that is expected to be grown and to grow with use cases and features, and also with the latest offerings within our cognitive services. I would say every month we get a new SDK, or there's a new feature in one of the cognitive services, and we endeavor to update that here so that people can very easily test out these new features. Like I said, this is not a product, so this is not something that you're just going to take and you're going to put it in production. But what it is intended to do is, for the developer, it's intended to be an end-to-end template that you can take the parts that you want and only the parts that you need. So it is end-to-end in that it has a UI. It's implemented in React. It's a vanilla React implementation, and then it also uses a lot of Azure components, obviously. So we're using Azure Functions as well as Cosmos DB. And the flow is that we want to drop documents into blob storage, run a custom pipeline, and have those insights be persisted within Cosmos DB. Can you swap out Cosmos DB for your favorite database? Absolutely. Everything I'm going to show you, 100% of the code and 100% of the deployment scripts are included in the repository. So it has an MIT license, so you can feel free to update this as you see fit. So some common use cases that folks like Brandon and I get a lot of. We get, like, for example, contact center. Contact centers will have lots and lots of conversations, so they'll have lots and lots of audio files. And with all of these projects, the idea is to take unstructured data and to pull out structured and specific insights. So for a contact center, some of the technologies we would use would be in Language Studio. We might have NER classification. We could use maybe BASIC, or even generate a custom model for that. Speech to text, obviously. Sentiment analysis would be a good thing to know. I would say translation, something that you can add on to any of these. It's pretty common that we would have contact centers all over the world. So if there's like a central hub that wants to be able to view the contents of these conversations, translation could be overlaid to convert the local contact center language into the hub language. We have document search. This one's very common. We have a bunch of docx, PowerPoints, PDFs sitting in a repository somewhere, and we'd like to just add a search layer on top. Azure Cognitive Search, it's effectively putting Bing search on your local domain of documents. You have an NER custom model you could put on there to pull out very specific insights. If they're scientific documents, if they're literature documents, if they're chemistry, health API, you can add a model on top of that to tag the documents with whatever specific insights or classifications you're looking for. And then of course, it would be OCR and translation on top of that. Form recognition, if you've not seen our form recognizer application, the idea is that you can parse fields in very common forms, like tax forms, invoices, receipts are very common, but a lot of people have their own specific internal forms, right? So rather than if you want to digitize those, rather than having somebody manually put those fields in, you can scan them into a PDF and drop them in, and Form Recognizer will pull them off and digitize those. And some of these can be mixed and matched. So now that we have this list of invoices, we can very easily put it back into a document search pattern. Another one that we get a lot of is redaction of PII. This is personally identifiable information. So this would be like telephone numbers, addresses, social security numbers, names, credit card numbers. We have a service that will go through and redact all of that. So some people just want to take their documents and just create a redacted form before they would add it to a search, for example. And now I'm going to show you some of the experience of the business process automation accelerator. And I'm going to try. All right. Let me know if you see a browser and it says welcome to the business process. Brandon, can you
Yep, we're
confirm
good.
that? We're good? Okay. Once you install it, this is your interface that allows you to build your pipelines. As you can see, there are 4 stages to this. First thing I do is I configure a new pipeline. I can view the existing pipelines, and then I'm going to drop some documents in. And then this will create a sample search application for you. And I'm going to go through each of these in a bit more detail. So let's talk about our use cases. So I've created some of these ahead of time just because, dropping the documents in can be a bit time consuming. So I'm going to maybe start with some of these that are already done. We have 3 use cases. One is leases. So this is a project that Brandon and I both worked on. We took some leases and they wanted to extract some very specific data from these. These leases were sometimes very old, sometimes they were scanned, sometimes they were ugly sideways scans, but they wanted to pull some very specific structured objects off of those documents and then digitize and persist those so that they're easily searchable. And that's a lease project. Earnings, this one's maybe kind of similar to our contact center. We have a bunch of audio documents and we want to turn those audio documents into something actionable. So what I did here is I just downloaded some financial earnings calls, like for Microsoft or 3M. I'm trying to think who I did. Coca-Cola are some companies, and they have their quarterly financial earnings calls. And so I just took those audio files and I dropped them into speech to text and did a few other things. And I'll show you how easy it is to do that. And then the third one is a manual. Let's say we have some instruction manuals or we have some documentation, maybe we have some compliance documents, who knows, and you would like internally for your employees to more easily find information within those documents. It's not uncommon for us to talk to firms that have thousands, hundreds of thousands of pages of documents, and it can be very difficult to find very specific information in there. So this one is showing how easily we can take a very large document, split it by page, and put it into a cognitive search application. So we'll start with leases. So what I've done here is these are existing pipelines, but I can show you what I've created. Well, I'll give you the experience first. So we'll do something like test, and we'll create a new pipeline. So here, this is the type of document that I want to get insights from. And most common would be probably these two, would be either an audio document or a PDF. When it says PDF, we're really talking about also Office documents. This could be PowerPoint, this could be DocX. We do get some people that just have XML. So these would be like for legacy Java systems, you might have a database that has a large amount of XML documents. Image documents are just pictures, JPEGs, and video, MP4s. So these are the types of documents that you can create a pipeline for. Most common for us, I would say, is these two, PDF and audio. So I'll click on PDF. And at every stage, when you click on, what you'll see next, your options are all of the services in the Azure portfolio, in the cognitive service portfolio that takes that data type natively. So in this case, these Azure cognitive services take a PDF natively. So we're looking at OCR, we're looking at a lot of form recognizers. So you're gonna read a lot of form recognizer things. I can tell you that all of these are pre-built models. So we have pre-built models for invoices, for business cards, for IDs, for receipts, for taxes. Very common though, these won't quite do it. So you're gonna have to build a custom model that is specific to the form that you are trying to parse. And then there's document translation. Document translation is a service whereby I can take a PDF or a PowerPoint and I can change the language without changing the document schema. And what I mean by that is it's going to have a certain font, it might be in bullets, there might be an image to the right. All of those things will be maintained, just the language will be taken from English to French, for example. If I click on OCR, we're now taking a PDF and converting it to plain text. So now that I'm in plain text, I see a bunch of other possibilities. We have something content moderator, excuse me, which will look at text and tell you if this is, perhaps there's profanity, perhaps there's violent intent in this language. So this is an increasingly popular service here for tagging documents that might not be appropriate for everyone. We have a lot of language service. So you'll see Language Studio here. And similarly to Form Recognizer, these are divided into pre-built models, such as any named entity recognition, PII redaction, and you can read across here, sentiment is obviously very important. And then you'll also see, here are some that are custom. We have a custom NER model. So we have a product called Language Studio that you can go in and very quickly and easily through a UI, generate your own model through there. And the models are NER, single classification, multiple classification, and we even support importing pre-trained Hugging Face models. And there's also a healthcare API. And we talked about translation service. This is one that when you select it, you can check the source language and then the target language, and then add it to your pipeline. And it's as simple as that. But language is something that we use in very many, just because more and more companies are global, and the translation service is a big help there. And so once you're done with this, let's say we do Albanian to Arabic, and we'll submit that. Now you can see here's our pipeline preview, and if I click done, it will create that pipeline. And it's as simple as that. We'll go back home and we'll look at the existing pipelines that I've set up already. We have leases, which has a form recognizer custom model, right? I've added a translation service just at the end of these, just because it's a very typical thing for us to do. And I also just wanted to show you how quickly we can add some of these. For some of these, we might do abstractive summarization or sentiment would also be very common. I don't know if you do sentiment on a lease, but very common to translate it. We have the earnings call. I took speech to text. I pulled off the named entities out of there, and I also translated it. And then I have a manual that I pulled down. It's a TypeScript manual written in Spanish, and I just translated it to English. And it's about a 400-page manual, and I created a search service out of it. And I would say each one of these took me about 20 minutes, right? You took, clearly just to click these does not take long, then you drop the documents in. For this one, I had to import it into Cognitive Search, which might have taken an extra 5 or 10 minutes. But you can very quickly, with your own data, test out some of these ideas. Once I'm happy with my pipeline, I can test it. I go into ingest pipeline, and I choose whichever pipeline I want. So if I choose leases, I can drop a document in here. The interface here is not the standard way to add documents. Since we're using blob storage, there's nothing preventing you from dropping in a folder of 100,000 documents at one time into blob storage. This interface is really just to help you test it. Once you're ready for production and you get everything ready and tested, the backend can handle, has the proper queuing and throttling that you can drop, 100,000 documents in, and it should be able to handle those bulk loads just fine. There's a button here for create a cognitive search data source. So this is just this helps you to do the first stage of importing your data into cognitive search. Okay. And then once we've done all of that, we've ingested our documents, we'll have something in, let's say we have all of our data in Cosmos DB. So it would look something like this. We would have all kinds of documents. They'd be in the form of, you can see that this is from the leases pipeline. You can see these are the outputs of our custom model, OCR translation. So I did create, for our first use case was the lease document. It required a custom model. And I can quickly show you our form recognizer studio that might, help you understand what the full process was end to end. So I have these lease documents, and you can just drop them. You create a custom model project in form recognizer. And on the right-hand side, I create the tags of the information that I want to pull from the lease. In this case, I'm just pulling the address of the property, how long the duration of the lease is, and who is the lessor of this. Clearly, you can do more than this. In the project that Brandon and I did, there's 40 or more things. But just for a quick and dirty model, I took, X number of these leases and just clicked on these. And it's as simple as, for the lessor, I just highlight it here. For the address, I highlight the terms here. For the duration, I highlight the terms here. Once I've created this model, I can come in on this side. I will say it's a PDF. It's a custom model. And I would just put the model ID in here. So you can see that once we've trained our model, you get something like 0.0.4. So I would just put that in here, and it would add this model to my pipeline. At that point, I can start dropping documents in and seeing the results. So the results would look something like this. It'll create a sample cognitive search application for you. And the idea is that, this might not be exactly what you want, but this is a pretty good start. If you're trying to integrate this into an existing application that you have internally, if you're starting new, it's in vanilla React. It's not using a whole lot of proprietary libraries or anything like that. But you can very quickly see the results of your structured data. So here we saw that there are three facets over here. We picked up some entities. So here's our list of entities that it pulled out. And this is from the pre-built entity model. So you could conceivably create a custom entity list and use this. So these earnings are large audio files. So we drop a list of these large audio files in here, and you can see that this is the Citigroup fourth quarter 2021 earnings. And I can start to pull out dimensions of text that are interesting to me, right? Maybe I'm interested in investment banking, right? And then you can also search on these. So each one of these is a different quarterly call of an earnings report. You can very easily imagine like a contact center, if you have conversations between a support agent and a client, that you could just drop these in, and rather than these kind of vague entities. They could be very specific problem types for your products. It could be product names, right? Services, and this would, and you can use this data then to create maybe even some charts. You could use it to maybe predict the types of problems you're going to see in the future. Okay. The next one was the leases. So these are the documents that I pulled in from the leases, if you remember. So the leases look something like this. And I dropped a bunch of these in, and what we see is that it pulled out 3 pieces of information. So this is the name of the lessor. This is the duration of the lease, and this is the address. So you can see this would be very, there's a lot of value here in being able to drop these leases and not have somebody look through these. The project that Brandon and I worked on, they had thousands to hundreds of thousands of leases they're going through. And a lot of them were, sideways, ugly scans, and we got pretty good data out of them. And so for each one of these, we're pulling out these this was a custom model, and these are OCR leases in here scanned. At the bottom, you can see what the document actually looks like. This is what it looks like within cognitive search, if you are interested in seeing the JSON form of it. And over here, we created facets for the different dimensions. So here we have the lessor, right? So so each one of these is a different company that is leasing these. So you can, if you can imagine if you had 100,000 of these, it would be very cool to be able to click on that and filter on just those leases. And the third use case we have is the manual. Now, mind you, this is a TypeScript manual in Spanish. So what I did is I found a 400-page document that is in Spanish. So if we look at the root OCR of it, you can see that this is all in Spanish. And I said, let's translate it to English, and let's put it into a search. Right? So this is pretty cool. I can come in here and I can search on, Bootstrap right? Or something like that. And I'll get, it'll go through and it will give me the most relevant pages with Bootstrap. But, what I'd really like is an answer. So that would be part of our semantic search within cognitive search. So now I can ask it, like natural language type questions. So I can say something like, what is Bootstrap, right? And instead of just getting the top answer, you can see I get more relevant answers when I ask about it, but I also get something like this. It'll say Bootstrap is a framework that facilitates web development. That's good. Bootstrap is the most popular framework for blah, blah, blah. And so while this styling might not be up to what you need, this would be a very good start for someone who wants to create a search app with their own documents internally and integrate it into their existing frameworks. There are some additional features, but I think at this point, what I'd like to do is maybe open it up to Q&A, because I know I've talked about a lot. So I'd like to hear maybe some of the feedback and some of the questions that people might have.